Hey there, and welcome back to Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards and tell you if they are any good in the Pauper format or not. What is our first card going to be today? Sinister Sabotage. One double blue for an instant counter target spell and surveil. Strictly better cancel. We made a better cancel, everybody. It's still not that good. It's turns out cancel, not a particularly great counterspell in the Pauper format because we have so many other great counter spells. And even when you make a slightly better cancel, this one having Surveil 1, that's not nearly good enough. Funny, though, that this was uncommon for all these different sets. I guess Guilds of Ravnica was just the kind of one, but the starter commander decks. But then it took Ravnica Remastered for this to go down to common, but we wouldn't play it. We just have so many other good counter spells. You know, if you want to be more specific with your counter spells these days in the Pauper format, so you're using the 1 mana counter spells like Annul, which counters artifacts or enchantments, or you want to do Dispel, which does just instants, or you want to do Envelop, which does just sorceries, or Spell Pierce, which is going to work on a couple other things, but be cheap. And we just have so many other options in those cases. And then you also just have counterspell in the format, like actual factual counterspell is just available. And even that one, honestly, a lot of people are thinking is too expensive for a counterspell. We would rather just pay the 1 mana counterspells that are much more tailored to specific things, and that's why they're really good in sideboards for specific things as well. And that goes for the red elemental blast and blue elemental blast, in addition to all the ones I mentioned. So a strictly better cancel just really has no place in this format, which is, I don't know, a little bit sad. I think the format would be better if maybe we lowered the amount of counter magic that we had, or lowered the potency of counter magic that we had, and this was something that was a little bit more viable. But that's just not the world we live in, and it probably would create a ton of other problems. So let's just go with a 2 point. I guess it's 2.5. I got 2.5. I think is like a perfectly cromulent magic card for the Pauper format, and that's what this is going to get. 2.5, but not anywhere near playable. Next card is Aven Redeemer, 3 and a white for a 2/2 bird cleric with flying. You can tap it to prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn. We've kind of slowed down on these effects, we've kind of eliminated these effects entirely from Magic these days, modern Magic, because we found it to just like slow games down, or R&D rather found it to just slow games down, make combat math weird. It led to games becoming a real slog. And so a lot of these kind of tap to prevent damage spells or abilities have just kind of been phased out. This is an okay creature, I guess. 4 mana feels a little expensive. You are getting a 2/2 flyer, so it can swing in for okay damage, but paying 4 mana for that, there's a lot of cheaper ways to get a two power flyer in white. We just have so many other options for that. But the preventing the 2 damage is nice. I like that it can prevent it to any target. So it could be to a creature for combat math, or it could just be to your face to turn that lightning bolt into a lava dart. Okay, but the biggest problem for me is that you have the trade off. You have to make this trade off of, do I swing in with this 2 power flyer because then I can't prevent the damage anymore, or do I hold it up? And then if you're holding it up, what's the point of having the 2/2 flyer to begin with? I would rather just have that ability on some random 1/1 or something. So you're kind of paying for both of these things in the mana cost, even if you're not getting both of those things on any given turn. You can get either one of those things any given turn, but you're not really getting both. And that is, now I just feel like I'm kind of wasting my time, or I paid for things that I'm not actually getting all the time. And we just have cards that give you things all the time for the mana cost that you paid for them. So that just kind of keeps this out of viability. 4 mana is just a lot of mana too. I think we're gonna go with is this better or worse than than the slightly better cancel. I guess it's technically worse. I'll go for a 2.4. Bearer of Glory is 1 and a white for a 2/1 human soldier. During your turn, this creature has first strike, and you can pay 4 and a white to give creatures you control +1/+1 until end of turn. I think this is a perfectly fine Magic card. It was pretty good in limited. I remember in Tarkir Dragonstorm, this did okay, but it's uh, I every time though I'd see this card, I go like, oh god, they have a Voice of Victory on the on the battlefield because these cards look incredibly similar. Voice of Victory, like they they're meant to look similar, right? They're aren't they either side of the yeah they're either side, right? Like you have this guy and then yeah, that's that guy in the background. So they're kind of meant to look exactly alike because they are. Um, but this one's common and that one's rare, and the rare one is really good. That's an incredible card. But the common one, this one's kind of just fine. A white weenie deck could totally use this. The 5 mana pump is too much for a pump. But it is repeatable. You know, if you did have infinite mana, this could give your creatures infinite plus infinite. I guess that's something. But I think probably the best thing on this thing is the first strike on your turn. So this guy can swing in pretty freely, and if you do have the mana, you can pump it up to have a bigger first striker, and that feels pretty good too. It's a solid little card. We just have better and more solid little cards for white weenie decks, and we'll play those instead. But I do like this guy quite a bit. I think he's a perfectly fine card, and I'll actually give him a 2.8. Probably could go even higher. I think you could even go all the way up to like a 3. Still not really playable, but a good card. Quenchable Fire is 3 and a red for a sorcery. Quenchable Fire deals 3 damage to target player or planeswalker. It deals an additional 3 damage to that player or planeswalker at the beginning of your next upkeep step, unless that player or planeswalker's controller pays blue before that step. Okay. I actually kind of like this. maybe I'm crazy, but I do kind of like this. 4 mana for 3 damage to a player is not amazing. That's actually a really bad rate for our format. But 6 damage for 4 mana isn't so difficult. And against any deck that's not playing blue, well, that's not true because there's plenty of decks that can make any color of mana. You know, like a Bonder's Ornament or something can tap for any color of mana. Prophetic Prisms and things like that. And those are relatively played throughout the format. So there's ways, treasure tokens too. Your opponent has ways of paying that blue, but then they also have to waste those resources to be able to pay that blue. I do kind of like that. And they have to do it at the beginning of your next upkeep, not their next upkeep. So so I guess there's more opportunity for them to tap out and not have the mana on your next upkeep. Which means that they're generally going to be taking 6 damage from this thing. 6 damage over 2 turns, but still, that's not awful. It actually there's plenty of cards. I'm thinking putting my commander hat on very briefly, but there's plenty of cards that want you to do damage on multiple turns, and this might not be the worst thing for that either. If you're in, I mean, I guess the easy one's like a Valgavoth deck, but I don't know. There's something kind of interesting about it. I don't hate this. It's too slow for the format. That is for Pauper taking the commander hat off and putting it over to the side. But for Pauper, this isn't terrible. Like this is a pretty good rate for damage, and even over 2 turns, I don't necessarily hate it, and I kind of like it a little bit that I'm dealing 3 damage on my next turn before anything's even happened. So if you do have any sort of triggers that like spectacle triggers or I forgot some of the other mechanics, but there's plenty of other mechanics that say, hey, if your opponent's been dealt damage this turn, something else happens. You get some extra bonus, and I like that because this will just trigger that kind of freely on your next turn. So I don't want to give this a terrible score. It is too slow to get a good score, but I think I could go for I can go for a 3.1 on this. I kind of like it. Mishra's Onslaught is a 3 and a red for an instant. Choose one. Either create two 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, or creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Oh boy, this is entirely too normal on either side. Modal spell. You gotta like that. Instant speed. I definitely like that. I really like instant speed. Make a couple of creatures because you can either use that to surprise block, maybe even surprise trade with an opponent's creature. You can act like these creatures have flash and just cast this instant at the end of your opponent's next turn. So it's, not only do they kind of have flash in that way, but they kind of have pseudo haste at that point because you'll just untap them and be able to swing with them on your next turn. Pretty good for control when you're holding that up, and can maybe cast your other spells, maybe cast your lightning bolt. But if you don't need to, now you can cast this at the end of the turn and get the couple of creatures. Soldiers is a pretty solid creature type to use with. Maybe not so much in red, but not terrible in red. They're artifacts, so you are making two artifacts to put on the table. Lots of decks would like something like that. And then the other part of the effect isn't terrible either, giving all your creatures +2/+0 until end of turn. That can lead to a big alpha strike if you've gone wide. Like, there's nothing bad about anything on this card, except maybe the price. Four mana for this is probably what it deserves to be, but it also puts it out of playability. I think if this was 3 mana, we'd be playing this in a lot of different decks. But at 4 mana, not so much. It's cool though. I want to go for something like a. Man, this one also is kind of in that same kind of groove of these last few cards we've gotten. I think I'll go for like a 3.4. Yeah, that's a pretty solid little card there. Thorn Thallid is 1 in double green for a 2/2 fungus. And at the beginning of your upkeep, put a spore counter on this creature. Remove 3 spore counters from this creature. It deals a damage to any target. That's an interesting thing for green and for Thallids specifically. Most of the times, any of these Thallids or any of these things that use spore counters will generate a Saproling token once you have 3. But this one specifically is doing direct damage to any target. That is not a very green ability. Green can destroy flyers or it can do damage to flyers, but it typically doesn't do direct damage to anything else, unless you're doing like bite effects or fight effects, but those still kind of count on a creature. I guess this is also on a creature, but green doesn't have a prodigal sorcerer type effect, but this kind of is. Where are you going to put this? Nowhere. A 3 mana 2/2. That's going to be pretty bad in most situations, especially in green, where you just have access to way better creatures for this mana cost. Just from a stat perspective, no sort of evasion on this thing. You have to wait a bunch of turns to be able to get the spore counters to even take them off to do the damage, unless you're in a proliferate style deck. But if you're doing a proliferate style deck, you probably don't need this creature in there. You probably just have way better things to proliferate, whether you're going for more of a poison build or a +1/+1 counters build. This is just an incredibly slow way of making that work. I mean, it does get around a lot of stuff. If you put +1/+1 counters on a creature without trample anyway, your opponent can just keep blocking those. This is at least doing direct damage, but at such a slow frequency that you should be way dead before you deal even 2 damage to your opponent with this thing. Much less 20 to get them dead. Yeah, it's too slow. It's too bad, but I it's kind of cool, and it's Fallen Empire, so it's got all these different versions of them too, and I think a lot of them look good. Look at this guy. Look at that guy. Look at that guy. That look at these are great. These are fantastic arts on all those for sure. But in terms of score, it's like a 1 point. it's like a 1.3. This is really heinous. Next is Swarming of Moria, 2 and a red for a sorcery. Create a treasure token, and you amass orcs 2. So 3 mana, and you get paid back a mana immediately with the treasure token. I don't hate that, and that is another artifact on the table if that matters to you. And then amassing orcs, you put a couple +1/+1 counters on an army you control. And if you already have an army, well, if you have an army, then you just put a couple +1/+1 counters on it. If you don't have an army, you make a 2/2, basically. So a 3 mana 2/2 that gives you a treasure token. We kind of have creatures that do that, and I think I would take the creatures over the spell because creatures can more easily be bounced or blinked. And with this, you'd have to start thinking about, okay, do I need an ardent elementalist? That's the one that's able to, because that's a creature that you also would blink or bounce to be able to get your spells back, like an archaeomancer would. Or if you are playing an archaeomancer because you're playing blue in this deck, in this theoretical deck that plays this card, those are ways of getting spells back to your hand. Maybe, but I think at that point it would just be easier to have the creatures out there and be able to bounce those with core skyfish or something to that effect. Or I don't know. I don't really like this on spells. I also don't love the army token generally. I guess it's cool that you can keep growing the army and making it bigger, but I would kind of just rather this make a random 2/2 and be able to make lots of different 2/2 tokens rather than being able to make a big army token that somebody would then just cast down and kill. So I don't think I love this, and I can give it like a 2.9. It's still okay. I treasure token is probably the best part of the card. Next, ooh, I like this one a lot. Dragon Lord's Servant is 1 and a red for a 1/3 Goblin Shaman. Dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. When I did have a Gruul dragon deck that was Teamer, or at least like had a transformative sideboard to make it Teamer. This is after Tarkir Dragonstorm came out because we got a lot of new common dragons with that. I thought, okay, there might be something here. Maybe this is something I could brew up. And I did, and it was okay. Like, it's a solid little deck, and it used Dragonlord's Servant quite well because you had plenty of green and red dragons that were expensive, but nice to be able to have a little cost reduction here. Your Segu Wildlings or your Fang Dragons or lots of other dragons that certainly cost quite a bit because they're dragons. And if you can make them a little cheaper, that's great. The problem is, even though that was a solid little deck and it did some okay things and it made big creatures and it swung in with flying and it could win games, it also was not better than the other Gruul options available in the Pauper meta at the time, and definitely not now as we've continued to get more pieces. If you're playing Gruul in Pauper, there's a few different ways you can go that are all pretty darn strong. Whether it's you want to go with the Panza strategy, and that's a pretty decent strategy. You can go with the Gruul ramp strategy. You can even kind of combine Gruul ramp and Panza, as some people do, and that's a pretty viable deck as well. You can go with a more like Eldrazi spawn token kind of build using Impact Tremors or Raphael Tough Turtle. You're getting your Writhing Chrysalis. You're putting 3 creatures on the board at once. You can get the Golem from Modern Horizons 3 that also is an Impact Tremors guy himself that has the Unearth. So you have those different decks that all do better in the meta, especially the first 2 that I mentioned, the Panza and the Gruul Ramp. Those work really well. You also have the mostly red deck that splashes green for the Red Storm, but that's another Gruul deck technically that you could play in the format. So it's really tough when you have all those really good cards to then really good cards, really good deck archetypes. It's really tough to say, well, what if Gruul Dragons? It works, it just doesn't work well enough, and a creature like this is one of the reasons kind of why it doesn't work, even though this is a good creature. Because while it is pretty cheap, it can block a decent amount of stuff as a 1/3, and yes, it makes your dragon spells cheaper. You're playing this because you have to, because all your dragon spells are too expensive to begin with, and playing this, despite it accelerating you, also has slowed you down because you don't have, you're not putting something as impactful on the board on turn two. That's kind of my thoughts. It's again, it's an okay card. It does some good work whenever it shows up, but I think if you're using a card like this, you kind of already failed a little bit. And I say this as somebody who has built this deck and failed. It works against some decks. You'll pick up a couple wins. You'll feel pretty good about it. Oh, dragons in at common rarity, isn't that crazy? And it is, but you're going up against meta decks, and you go, oh right, this deck can't possibly hang, and that's a little bit sad. Maybe we get better dragons in the future. I still don't know if this guy would necessarily go in that deck. Because if you're getting better dragons, that means they're probably cheaper dragons. I don't know. I don't know. One last thing, because it was something that was put in that I put in my deck with it. It's called Reckless Barbarian. Here you go. So a 2-mana 2/2 Dragon Barbarian. So a Grizzly Bear, you can sacrifice it and add double red. If you pair this guy with this guy, now you're mana positive. So you're paying a single red mana to put this guy on the table because he's also a dragon, remember? And then you could sacrifice him, add 2 red mana, and now you're starting to build up some some actual value there. There's also another what is it called? Patron of the Arts. Yeah, Patron of the Arts, also a dragon noble here. So you could potentially make this 2-mana spell instead of a 3-mana spell, but it comes down when it enters or dies. You make a treasure token. If you have a sacrifice outlet or something, you can make this mana positive as well with the treasure tokens, and you can also mana fix with this. So these were all parts of the deck that I had built and thought it was okay. It put down stuff early game and then was able to use those resources to put out big dragons. But it still was too slow, not good enough, and you just had better things. But hey, this would help you get your Avenging Hunter out a turn earlier, and that's really good. Avenging Hunter, really good card. I don't know if you knew that. So I'll go for like a 3.6 on this one. Despite everything I said, I think this still is a good card. Yeah, I'll go with a 3.6. We spent a lot of time on it. What's next? Sever Soul, 3 and double black for a sorcery. Destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. You gain life equal to its toughness. Reading that, I remember we have done this. We did this somewhat recently. Paying 5 mana for a spell like this is kind of crazy, especially when it still says target non-black creature. Come on. At that point, if I'm paying 5 mana, you can give me a murder with upside. That's crazy. You don't need to force me to have non-black on that one. We didn't give this a good score. I won't score it now since we already did, but I'll just skip it and get to Vines of the Recluse. Single green mana for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+2 and gains reach until the end of turn, and you untap it. I feel like we see this all the time. There's so many cards that do this kind of thing. Giving it reach, giving it more toughness, and untapping it, you can like a solid little combat trick, especially on the defensive end. But you could still use this by giving your creature pseudo vigilance if you want to do this as your creature attacks. You can you've tapped the creature to attack, and then once your opponent's blocked with it, you can use this offensively by both untapping your creature and giving it more power and toughness. So potentially you make your opponent chump when they didn't think they were going to, and now your creature is up on defense for their next turn as well. So you can do some cool things with it. It is a single green mana for it. None of those things are bad. I think the maybe the real issue is we have a card that is a little better these days, which is the Guac and Marshmallow Pizza, which not exactly the same thing, but it does have flash, which is kind of like instant speed. It gives your creature +2/+2 instead of +1/+2. You still untap the creature. Now it doesn't gain reach, but you are getting an artifact that gets on the table for the same mana cost. and you're able to. It is a food, so you're able to crack it for those reasons, and this has combo potential around it. And all those reasons make the pizza better than the Vines of the Recluse. Even if I like the flavor of this a little bit more than the pizza, which sounds weird to say. Pizza's delicious, but the flavor of, hey, turning my guy into a spider, like a recluse spider, is cool, and he's kind of got giant spidery stats once you do that. So that part's cool. Score wise, I could go for like a 2.6. It's not bad. It's tough to get combat tricks in the format, but I kind of like that one. Scourge Servant is 4 and a black for a 3/3 Phyrexian zombie with Infect. That's it. 5 mana for a 3/3 is always going to feel bad, but Infect is a really good ability. Giving -1/-1 counters to the creatures that block it, or it blocks. Giving poison counters to the opponent if you can get in. This gives a decent amount of poison counters in a single swing. And even if you can't get in, you're just eroding your opponent's defenses so you can potentially get in on the next turn. It is just too normal though, and it is too costly. 5 mana for this effect is a lot. And if you are playing a deck that wants to do poison stuff, generally I would say you're doing the poison with something that puts a poison counter on the opponent indirectly, or you've got like a 1/1 flyer with infect or toxic or something that's able to put that counter on, and then you work on proliferating those counters more than putting on those counters through combat, which a card like this has to do because it has nothing else on the card except infect. But yeah, it is a zombie. It is a Phyrexian. Both of those creature types are somewhat relevant in the Pauper format. Zombie certainly more than Phyrexian, but there's Phyrexian stuff you can do. Decently statted, just not decently costed, and that is going to be a problem here. We'll go for a 2.3. And why don't we give ourselves a bonus card before we call it? Burdened Aerialist. I know how to say words. Burdened Aerialist is 2 and a blue for a 3/1 human pirate. When this creature enters, you create a treasure token. And when you sacrifice a token, this creature gains flying until end of turn. That's fun, I guess. Um, Similar to the red card we saw, this does just kind of pay you back the turn you put it down. 3 mana 3/1 is not the best of stats, and sacrificing a token to give it flying, sure, okay. Now I can swing in for 3 damage. That'll feel good when you do it the one time when you had the treasure token. It also, if you do want to do that, it's limiting the times that you want to, or that you're able to use the treasure token because you need to give it flying on a specific turn. I guess you can use this defensively if you got this guy held up, and you can turn him into a flyer at instant speed by sacking the treasure token and then blocking one of their flyers. I think more often than not, you'll want to use this offensively, which means now you need to crack the token at a very specific time on your turn, because you'll need to do it either your first main phase or as you swing in combat. But if you're doing that, then when are you actually using the mana from the treasure token? So you probably using it in your first main phase. It gives your opponent a lot of time to respond. They can just kill the creature as you sacrifice the treasure token, or they can force you to, just if they destroy all your artifacts or something like that, or try to destroy this treasure token specifically, you might be forced to spend that treasure token, and then you wouldn't be able to have the flying stuff later. Now, if you're a deck that is built around a lot of tokens and can make a ton more tokens and are able to sacrifice those tokens at instant speed and hopefully freely, then maybe this makes a little bit more sense, and you can certainly build your deck around that. But I don't like building my deck around something that now feels like my deck is held hostage. My worry is that now I'm just going to be so in my head about when do I crack these tokens. I need to make sure this guy gets flying again, whether for offensively or defensively. I think it just makes you play worse because you're trying to keep all of your options available to you instead of just kind of picking the best option for you that turn. And that's what I really don't like. I feel like you play scared when you play a card like this. So I'm not going to give it a great score. Also, just one toughness, really easy for an opponent to take this out with so many things, and I don't really feel like you're getting the value out of it. So I'll go for a 2.2. Maybe you could even go higher. It does make you a treasure token. So again, blinking and bouncing, those are things that are available to you. It's a little expensive to blink or to bounce. And also a little silly to blink because you're probably spending the mana from the treasure token to blink this thing, and then what are you actually really accomplishing? Eh, yeah, I think we can go for like a 2.2 and call it a day there. Thanks for joining me. See you on the next one.